Call the meeting to order. Please join us in the flag salute.
With allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it belongs, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right now is time for topics from the floor. This is for items not on the public hearing. We're limited to 5 minutes per topic. There's a timer sitting here that you'll notice that pay attention to the time. Please state your name for the record.
Brady Preheim. I'd still withhold my objections for Charles Kasner and Mr. Rosengard to be on the commission because they have documented why in public. I'm also glad to see your new attendance policy, which I hope you enforce. You have several members that would already be removed from that policy. I think the change is that was your time, and I think you just now said 3 in a row, I think is the change, which I think it should be done because you don't meet that often, and if you miss 3 meetings, you should be removed. I think it's pretty good. The other thing that I would comment about is grace. I'm glad to know that that's now part of our city code. And I Googled your website to look for the form to apply for grace, and I did not find it. So I don't know how it happens. I don't know if like you can pre-ask for grace, like before you start building, just fill out a grace form and get grace, and then do what you want because you've already applied for grace. I think it's a very bad policy to give grace to people that probably had a plan that they didn't plan on having or following in the very first place. I have dealt with Mr. Trash, or however he wants to say his name, personally. It's his style. And I doubt sincerely if at the very beginning he planned on following it. And why should he? Because he's gotten away with it. Frankly, I think that even if he had followed the plan, I don't believe that anyone that is remodeling can keep one wall and that can be called a remodel. I think that your policies for having a remodel should be 50% at a minimum. If you can't save 50% of the building, then it's not a remodel, it's a demolition. But giving someone after the fact grace for on Jacob's own authority, I think is a mistake, and I think it was wrong. And it was clear that the planning commission did not have a clear decision for him to take, and that should have been postponed until you had a full board and given him a definitive decision on it. And the precedent, I think, is very bad. And I don't know if you guys can correct it now, probably not in that case, but going forward, it is certainly something to consider, unless of course you want to put the grace form on your website and let everyone apply for it.
Next.
Hello. Stephen Toski, citizen of St. Helens. So first, there are some things that we need to address. You as a planning commission are the legal body of planning in the city. And Cisco saying that you want it to be a certain way, if it's not within the law, doesn't fit within the law, you can't say it's okay. I want to address the minutes because they need to be addressed. I reviewed the May 13 decision, and I think all of you should definitely go through it because I think all of you need to hear it. Because what we ended up with is sort of a bogus remodel project that ended up being very unsafe. And there's nothing in the minutes about the testimony of the contractor and the owner of the property before the planning commission that the chosen construction methods by the contractor resulted in an unsafe condition which could cause the immediate death and significant bodily injury of anyone on a construction site. And that is the reason why they decided to not move forward with this bogus remodel. And that was repeated testimony. That somebody could be killed out there. We had to put something in there immediately. There's nothing in the minutes about it. And remodel, there are definitions in the development code about what a remodel is. And I can tell you, this building is not a remodel and never was. It has to stay within the same footprint of the building. It has to do a lot of things that it's not. And so to move forward with this thing as if it's a remodel without a variance, without a public hearing was unlawful. All of it was. And to come in and say, gee whiz, somebody almost got killed on our job site because we're trying to do this bogus remodel and we want grace. There's no legal procedure on that. There is no legal path for this developer. And so the minutes, because I'm going to be filing a LUBA complaint. There's no question about it. The only question is what procedure are we in? And I'm asking you as the planning commission to make sure the minutes accurately reflect what occurred. Number one, there needs to be minutes about what a safety hazard this was. That has to be in there. We can't allow for construction that might kill people. Somebody come forward, have public testimony about it. It's not in the minutes. Secondly, the last decision says with a split decision for the sole purpose of providing staff guidance, Gretchen will decide how to proceed at a future time. Okay. That was not the decision of this commission. What the commission said was, what would the next steps be? There was no answer. What are the next steps? Nobody knows. Somebody asked us, it's a staff decision. Jacob said, yes, that is not what this commission said. And I want to make sure that the minutes don't reflect that the planning commission had devolved its authority to Gretchen, Mr. Gretchen. This requires a notice of decision. That is the time frame to file a LUBA appeal. There needs to be a notice of decision. I have not received a notice of decision that this planning commission granted grace, that Jacob granted grace, and I am on the record as an objector to this project from the beginning. So there needs to be a notice of decision. So we're outside of the law right now. And this comes back to kind of a discussion about where I was when I was on the planning commission, and that is having our planning commission plan and be involved in planning. A year ago, these people came and said, we got an issue with parking. And I said, then we need to start working on a parking plan. No parking plan has been worked on for a year. And now these folks ended up with a problem and they have no legal way out. And so that is the issue here, is that we're trying to do something very big here on the waterfront. And we really aren't putting the tools in place to build the project like we want it to be. So I'm just going to say this, a goal without a plan is nothing but a dream. Let's planning commission, but let's make sure we get our minutes right. Let's try and make this a learning experience for everybody and move forward in a positive way. And that might be a few bumpy roads for this developer. Blight in this town must be eliminated. I'm so tired of seeing these buildings that are in dilapidated state continue to exist here. 5 years, that thing on Columbia Boulevard that used to be the clock shop is sitting there. Please move forward with eliminating the blight in this city. People should be ashamed of themselves the way they are keeping their property in the city. And they should be fined and it should be eliminated. Architectural standards, I'm happy to help you with those. I'm happy to help get this jumpstart our downtown. Otherwise, we're going to end up with something that's somebody else's idea and not our idea as citizens of this city. So thank you.
Anyone else? Great. So we have minutes dated from May 13th. I had a couple corrections. But I think that Mr. Toski brings up a great point in this particular case. Can we amend the minutes that include more testimony on that hearing that we're talking about? I'm not sure the procedure of that. That's me more clearly, especially if he's gonna file a LUBA claim that we need to really document everything as much as possible.
It's a recorded meeting.
Okay, so we think we're. All right. And I know that the minutes are just a summary, but I do have a couple corrections. On page 2, the very last paragraph says motion. And it says Vice Chair Shoemaker makes a second. I don't know if that's supposed to be Cisco or seconded it. The top of the next page, the time just needs to be, I'm sure it's just a typo. But the time that I opened the hearing 7. Missing a 0 there. If we'd like any discussion on amending the minutes, or if we have a motion.
I'll have a motion to amend the minutes per what you've just outlined.
We have a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Commissioner Herman? You, aye? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Discussion items are the planning commission attendance policy discussion. I did a little research, and what I found the closest was from the city of Portland. And I think that almost impossible meeting unexcused absences for 3 consecutive meetings. So they do 3 consecutive absences for 20% of meetings in a year, which ends up to be like 2.4. Either round it up or round it down. Does not have to be consecutive. Don't know if we want to make any recommendations to the city council, or I thought that was it. I just think 3 consecutive meetings is never going to happen.
Well, I think what's missing from what I've read in Portland and their bylaws and how they operate is that they have a mechanism for, see a removal of a commissioner. None of our commissions have that. We also don't have a mechanism to remove, an officer. I think if we had these mechanisms, it's not so much trying to remove people, it's actually modifying behavior.
We have mechanisms and we've used them.
Well, I mean, for the commission himself, we have to go through.
The planning commission.
Do we have it for, okay,
Yeah, it's, cause we had one member who showed up a couple times and just stopped showing up.
well, that's the absences. I'm talking about generally, not just absences. It's just also if somebody's not working well with others and that type of stuff.
Yeah, so with the public hearing, the council can remove a member for misconduct or non-performance of duty. Misconduct, or excuse me, non-performance of duty means 3 consecutive absences without an excuse. Misconduct is not defined by our code, but I put the dictionary definition in there.
But that is the city council. That's not us. So we don't have any mechanism.
I see as the body
Yes,
to influence. I got you. Okay,
to refer to the council, that type of.
gotcha.
This is what I've read in.
And then Portland also has I think clearer guidelines about what's an excused absence, what's an unexcused absence, and the time you're supposed to notify the council if it's 48 hours if possible that you're not going to make it for excused absence. Obviously, emergencies come up, but it really affected us the last meeting we had in the hearing.
I'd like to point out on that also that Angelica called me. I said, if you need to, give me a call and I can stop what I'm doing and be a part of it.
I just want to point out the City of Portland Planning Commission meets twice a month too, so that 20% in a year, if you just think about that and in percentage wise, it may not directly apply to. But,
Well, that 2.4 wasn't their number. It was based on 12 meetings a year.
yeah.
And I don't know when you skip a month or, but, just think we really need to, I mean, it's nice when everybody actually be here and not necessarily be online. I know we need to accommodate online, but we need to easily seat a quorum and so we can make these important decisions, especially with this potential of the waterfront. So we have some big decisions to make.
I don't believe they need to be consecutive.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Whether it be 3 meetings or
which I think is more than enough to allow for.
I think similarly, if you have, I think if you've got guidelines on notice, as you say, I think emergencies or something else, but if someone's going to miss meetings, generally they probably know that ahead of time.
Yeah. So what would we do? We would make a recommendation to the city council to change the,
And thankfully, we are working in chapter 2, not chapter 17, so we don't have all of the extra steps to go through the state. We can just write an ordinance and adopt it. So it's a lot easier. Just a matter of crafting the words.
so at a minimum, I'd like to propose that if it's 3 unexcused and they don't need to be consecutive, but 3 unexcused absences.
Guidelines just a no-show, or do we have guidelines about what's?
Can I ask a clarifying question? So in terms of getting an ordinance before the council itself, how much ability do we have to workshop a draft? For example, if we circulate a draft via email, does that invoke a public meeting rule? Yeah. So we're gonna have to do it all in meetings. Could we talk about what we want in this meeting and then one of us write the draft outside the meeting?
Sure. Yeah.
Great.
'Cause you're not
Discuss it.
collaborating, you're just
Lovely.
Then could they possibly send it and not anybody comment on it so they can reflect on it?
It's like packets are sent,
Right.
just not talking about
I
it.
just want to clarify that. So-
That's helpful.
yeah, it's just the danger of anybody replying.
Yes,
You're starting to get into the
blind copy everybody.
woods.
Yeah.
And so
BCCing everyone's a good idea for that. Yeah, so 3 absences, non-consecutive.
Excuse.
But we gotta have the definition of what is excused or what is.
Yeah.
What would excused be? So I think you can get there in a few ways. One would be if you provide enough notice, you are excused. The other would be you provide notice and there's some mechanism for excusing. I think the problem would be we as a group can't make a decision about excusing outside of this meeting, right? Because then we'd be back in the same public meeting problem. And I don't know if we have the authority to give anyone else the ability to decide who's excused or not. So it may just have to be if you give 48 hours notice, then you are excused. And that's certainly the easiest.
But then again, I mean, as I pointed out, maybe we want to look at more of a holistic thing
Yeah.
like this, rather than just absenteeism.
Sure. I mean, we could formalize.
This is not, I mean, it's something we can discuss for,
Yeah.
a number of meetings, so consider, develop as we go along and propose it.
Yeah. Additional.
I mean, I'm saying this.
Yeah, as long as you don't drag it out like textual standards, other things we've drug out forever. Which I take responsibility for a lot.
I think we all,
But
we all do
Yeah,
on that one.
yeah.
But a good example is I won't be here next meeting.
Sure.
I'm leaving for vacation within 48 hours of the meeting and I won't have time to be here.
Fair enough.
I'm giving plenty of notice.
So much
but
notice.
Is that a valid reason? Could that be unexcused? I mean,
Yeah, I think
we're all volunteers and that's a valid reason. You're just giving notice that you're not gonna be here, so.
at this point, getting a notice requirement is an improvement on what we've got. So let's aim for that and we'll see how it goes, particularly because I think it's, again, I feel like we'd have to figure out some fancy mechanism to get the excusing process to work.
We overcomplicating it though?
Not necessarily. I mean, these sound like relatively simple changes. Just wordsmithing, and it doesn't sound like it's paragraphs and paragraphs of code. So yeah, so far, we're in the manageable territory.
Right, are you willing to draft that?
I'm happy to draft it, yeah. Draft it up and BCC it to everybody.
Place to start. All right, planning director decisions. Anybody, these were all previously emailed to us. Anybody have any questions? None. Our proactive items, architectural standards. I know we made our first baby step on that, but anybody have any thoughts on where we go from here and how we move forward beyond just the window suggestion we made? Where is our next step? We can keep this at least moving at a snail's pace and not stop.
We know it's citywide and windows. And so my suggestion at the last joint meeting was find examples that are good and bad. And then we can look at those examples. Why is this good? Why is this bad? And do we want to codify the good in and the bad out? That's one idea. And that doesn't have to be how you follow it, but that lets you attack it in baby steps. Like if you're in town or another town and you see a building, oh yeah, there's a window or there's a wall without windows. I'll get a quick picture of it. But
When we say that, we're talking about doing it citywide, that doesn't mean that we cannot have different standards for different parts of the city, does it? Or
it was just a way of determining your scope. If it's citywide, okay, well, that's a broader scope. But I think the idea from
just confused my.
and then if it varies depending on where you're at in the city, then it's even a little bit more broader. But that's okay.
A lot of discussion we've had where the district may be treated differently than outside the district. So is that what
Yeah, I
you're
just-
thinking of?
Well, yeah, I just want to make sure that that would still be a possibility
Yeah.
of being able to do that, because I do think it makes a difference whether you're talking about being in short district, in a neighborhood, or in a business area,
Totally agree.
everything that way.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
It already does go through it.
Well, do we want to start with Jacob's suggestion and bringing some examples of what we're thinking of, and then he'll give us something to
Yep.
work with?
I got a question about this, because one of the things that's been, I think, bedeviling us around all of our proactive items is this necessity that we not discuss it outside of this venue. I understand, if I understand correctly, the city doesn't just have a general counsel hanging out all the time, but we've got someone on retainer.
Yeah, we have our, Jordan Ramus.
Is there a process for asking them to look into whether there is a way to legally structure a process by which people can discuss things like this outside these meetings? Surely some other municipality has an answer.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a relevant question.
And I don't presume where that would fall on the priority of things the city needs their council to do. It could be way down the list. It just seems like it's a question worth asking.
My understanding is that we can discuss it among ourselves, just can't. I can talk about it with you, you can talk about it with her.
Right. We just can't
Talk
have
about
more
that.
than two of us.
But you can't talk about it with him, because that'd be the quorum.
Right.
So you can do some discussion, but you have to be circumspect.
That's not what my understanding
Circumspect about it.
is.
That's not what yours is.
Well, my understanding is, just because it's only two of us doesn't mean we can be discussing it outside of the meeting.
Yeah, because at first we thought it was a quorum issue.
Yeah.
And then the state agency
OGEC,
or
Government Ethics Commission.
them, they came out with this new thing and we're like, holy cow. Which any discussion that could result in policy, even if it's not a quorum, is a potential taboo. And taboo brings litigation, brings more anger in this room, which we've seen many times, more poison, and generally is something we want to try to avoid, although
Is there a workaround though, that we could have a citizen committee, like citizen volunteers, they do research and present to us as a board?
Yeah, could we delegate it out? They're just,
To citizens, because they're not having those guidelines, and they could come back to us and say whether it's architectural standards or vacant storefronts or parking or any of those things.
Be allowed to educate yourself.
right, and to be clear, I'm not looking for a way to circumvent public record law or the the ethical obligations that we have and should live up to. I'm just trying to figure out how a municipal organization gets things done that take more than a few hours every month. Like, there's got to be an answer.
I went to the ethics meeting and it can be done by subcommittee, but it has to be a public meeting. So if you're going to have a subcommittee work on a problem, it needs to meet in public forum.
Sure.
And therefore, the people who are at the meeting that are going to present decisions, it's public meeting. And that's what the ethics person said at the training that we had, I think earlier this year in the library. The idea is, if you want to do something, this was my understanding, I do think it should be checked. But yeah, we're gonna meet in subcommittee and we're gonna have a citizen committee and it's gonna be at this date and this time. And it's a public meeting and then people show up and make their comments and moves forward in a public forum. That's my understanding.
And it's available via Zoom.
Right, you've got a record and
There's minutes.
Charlie, where I got my interpretation from is from a conversation with OGEC. I asked them about talking with council about something. I can't remember exactly what it is, but they are saying, yeah, you can, but you have to watch out. Talking like with staff so they don't go to another person. That's how I derived at that.
I just feel like have these things we'd like to move forward on and our hands are tied.
Yes.
Sometimes it's hard to sit at a table like this and have an effective workshop that might be good with some field trips and that kind of thing. So I think we understand the public meeting part, or we feel a little,
I also want to point out again, is that I have a problem with OGAC being actually prosecutor and judge on these things. So there is a conflict there.
Does anybody challenge that? Any other, heard of anybody,
Haven't,
cities?
it's a pretty new thing.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard anything from the League of Oregon Cities on it. Heard anything from our city reporter about it. Sure, it'll happen somewhere. Yep.
All right, other is the proactive item is vacant and underutilized storefronts.
Now, in that case, we do have some guests that we invited.
You guys like to come up?
Representing the Main Street Alliance. They were kind enough.
I did do the discussion document, we only had 3 people there. Joint meetings, so I don't know if everybody's gotten that. Document. You need to let me know and I can line copy on it.
Great.
yeah, that would be great.
Please state your names for the record, please.
Erin Salisbury. I'm here in my capacity as the president of the St. Helens Main Street Alliance. And I'm Marcy Sanders, here on the same capacity as Main Street Alliance. And I think we don't have a presentation for you. We just figured this is an opportunity to talk to you about what Main Street organization is and does and some of the resources we may be able to offer. But maybe just spark another layer of conversation around this topic. We are your Main Street organization for the city of St. Helens. We are a 501c3. We're independent. We are all volunteers. We do not have staff at this point. And as an organization, we have worked pretty hard to follow what is called the Main Street approach, which is based on a national model and a state model. And it's the idea that historic commercial districts like both Holton in Uptown and our downtown Riverfront district can benefit from a multi-layered, multi-pronged approach to both preservation and development. So that we have, so as volunteers and as an organization, we kind of tend to look at it not just from one perspective. So we are not primarily an events organization, though we may sponsor and run events. We are not primarily a business alliance, like say a chamber, though we may promote issues and have supporters who are local business owners. It's really the idea that we can be a holding space for all the constituents that want to support seeing a healthy, vibrant commercial district, whether they're citizens, business owners, property owners. And there's some great data nationwide about why this approach works. And a lot of it has to do with pulling in the local expertise and the local needs and values about our community that we know are important, the things that we know in terms of detail, and not just not getting stuck in the weeds of big policy or kind of a disconnected throwing money at problems. That said, we would love to throw money at problems. I think a lot of you know us as being pretty successful in winning Oregon Main Street grants for the community. And we're really proud of that, again, as volunteers for bringing that money into the community. And we can do that in ways that is a little bit different than, say, a government agency can. So we try to kind of spread the needle there. That said, as part of the Oregon Main Street Network, we have peers across the state. There's over 100 other Main Street organizations throughout the state. We have a very strong network. I'm going to a training in Pendleton next week as part of kind of my required keeping us as part of the network. And we tackle a lot of different things. There's a lot of questions about how do we deal with the problem? We're not unique in St. Helens in having some vacant lots, vacant buildings, underutilized storefronts, all of these things. We're not unique in that. But what we get to do is we get to approach the problem here in St. Helens with the understanding that we know our neighbors, we know our fellow property owners, we know the history of the properties involved. And we get to make decisions as a community about how to move forward. So we're all really aware of that in this room. And I know that as a proactive item, part of what you guys are trying to decide, I'm guessing. And so, and I think we're going to ask a lot of questions here too. You're trying to decide what tools you've already got in your toolbox. And also then what your goals are ultimately and how much energy you want to put into achieving the goals and what's the best path forward, right? That's what it comes down to.
I think part of it is an educational process too, because as you know, people think preservation is what I can't do to my property and those kind of things. So we need to figure out an educational avenue, because it's going to be, I anticipate it's going to be messy and that people are going to be angry and you can't tell me what to do with my storefront. Kind of thing. So.
Astoria actually has they do loans, low interest loans to help that along. It's just one thing.
Well, doesn't Astoria use a two-prong approach? Which, we've talked about it before and thought that whatever we do, we kind of need to go that way. You incentivize by offering loans like that, but then I think you've got to have a stick also.
And they do have a good stick.
Well, Seattle requires you to register your vacant fee, and every time As the vacancy prolongs, the fee gets higher.
I've been, from the joint committee, I've been tasked to get an inventory, an updated inventory. I got some from you guys. I haven't asked, but I was gonna see about getting more data if you had any more, plus our own, and I'm gonna be walking around in each one of these, and I was hoping that, I was gonna ask Jacob if he has a, kind of a plat type of map I could use to start collating all this data.
Actually, I think that we just had a new tool roll out from Main Street America just in the last couple of months. So they rolled it out right ahead of the national network meeting. And it's a powerful tool that we have just started figuring out how to use, but it's based on the GIS map of our downtown. Our Main Street is already defined. So, and again, our Main Street district, which we had to define, as part of our mission, and that is registered, includes all of Holton, basically everything from the rails up at Highway 30, so Chamber of Commerce building, all the way down around the corner, down to First Street. So we have a huge district here in St. Helens. So everything includes the John Gum School. It includes Strand Street, so down to Crooked Creek. So, but what this tool does is it's actually demanding that we go and we plot every single property. And that we'll plot it in terms of, okay, is it a vacant lot? And the beautiful thing is this is data that Main Street America wants us to be providing. And so now we've got a tool to start parsing this out. So
Types of businesses and kind of a
yeah,
history of free property.
and uses, are there residential, units above? Are there, how occupied is it? We could even get as granular as, is somebody sharing with us what the commercial rent is for this space and what the square footage is? So that's actually a tool. I'd be happy to do a walk around with you and help fill in the blank. I mean,
Great.
that would be great. It's a tool we can all use. Absolutely.
Think of
Great.
you all.
So I'm curious,
Separate trip then.
I'm curious,
Okay, I took a
Yeah.
trip down Bolton today and walked past that clock shop and I've been coming here since I was.
Point of order.
Okay.
now I feel like I need to go review my memory about the clock shop. The question I had was, so I think vacant is probably pretty clear. Is there,
Is actually.
well, yeah, I was gonna say, probably,
Probably.
but I can see people debating it. I'm wondering bearing in mind that we can come up with our own definition, I'm wondering whether Main Street America or Main Street St. Helens has a working definition for underutilized.
Yes. I mean,
We don't have a form.
discussion document.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is something there.
Yeah, I would say that we don't have a formal definition.
And I'm just trying to feel it out.
It's always about a mix too.
Right.
So it's not just whether, whether a attorney's office in a storefront is considered underutilized,
Yeah.
especially if they're never there and they don't have, foot traffic going in there. It's really about
Hypothetical.
how many of them there are in one concentrated area.
That sort of holistic approach. makes
And as we, and that also then helps, from our perspective, it starts to be like, okay, well, if we want a walkable, retail friendly downtown, and we start to have some data that isn't about this individual building or that ownership, it starts to give us some data that we can take a look at and compare against other healthy, vibrant, main streets that are trying to do a similar kind of economic mix, right? If you're in wine country and you want to have a lot of wine shops, that's going to be a very different look and a mix than, say, if you are in clothing boutique kind of central, or if you're a service industry area, or if you're a lunch counter kind of place. that's part of what we love about the power of Main Street is that we do get to kind of have those conversations and decide what do we match up to. But I think back to your point about what does the planning commission need to do? And I think carrots and sticks are a great place to start. What I would love to ask you, I mean, we've talked about Astoria, but are we really missing a stick right now? Or isn't there already, don't we already have stuff in our code? Don't we already have some standards? I mean, part of what I'm seeing, you know, you're talking about proactive items and how do we move things forward? Right? I guess some of it would be as a body, do you have the tools that you need?
One of the things that when you mention that always comes to mind as an incentive was during the Great Recession, I believe that's when it was, the city cut building permits for new construction in half. It was temporary, but they could just, so much less, unfortunately, so much less expensive to bulldoze a building instead of save the building, which affects vacant storefronts. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, do you look at hours of operation? Because we have some really great businesses down here and oftentimes they're closed.
Yeah, we've
Track of that data too?
just started, again, that's another thing that we can do. I will do a pitch. We're a volunteer organization. So yeah, there's a certain amount of, it's gonna take foot traffic and we can fill in the blanks in a lot. Do you remember how many parcels we've got? We've got an insane, I should have looked at that number.
I want to say
before.
it's around 160. It could be higher.
I think it's higher than that,
Yeah.
but you know, we're not a 2-block stretch of historic district. We're not, you know, we're not even a McMinnville stretch of historic district. We are long, we are big, we have many blocks and, you know, and
Living, breathing thing. It's like we just lost Feathers and Leathers, but we just are gaining a bookstore. It's like.
Exactly.
Constant.
You know, I think part of what I want to make sure that we hit on too is that for your deliberations, you do have to talk about, okay, what's policy, what's planning, what's your process going to be? What are the tools that you've got as an agency? I guess the Main Street perspective would be, we will absolutely partner in any way that we can. But we see that beyond just having carrots and sticks, what really moves the needle for communities is when you establish real relationships. And when you are making connections with those individual property owners and finding ways to have the conversations about, well, why hasn't it been developed? And is it a situation where actually, no, it is way cheaper to keep it vacant and take a tax write-off on it every year than it is to figure out how to fix the HVAC and make the ADA access be accessible. This is this is something I inherited. I don't know how to deal with it. I don't want to be a landlord. Or is it simply that actually this is a situation where they just don't care? Or is it a situation where the plans were there, but the money isn't? We know that we also know that we have private property owners and that, you know, that's a slippery slope sometimes about starting to legislate how people must do things simply because we have taken a shine to believing that we know better what could happen. So I guess part of what I would say is that we would like to partner with you. Anything that we can do to help, we will. But I think part of the carrots have got to be engaging folks, property owners, business owners, where they're at, and finding ways to get beyond the conversations. Now, I also recognize that you have very limited staff, especially in the upcoming year. And so that is the other tricky thing about if you start to exercise the options that you've got to wield a stick. Now you're in a place of enforcement and you've got now staff having to deal with that. And I know you're very mindful of that, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it if the will is there to move things forward.
Yeah, just one thing is that with doing it with your software and that, I just want to make sure that the archive of what products of my labor will benefit the city is one thing. Would that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
The other thing is, I was listening to you and I was trying to remember points, but kind of slipped on that one. Let me get back to you on that.
Of course.
Does the tool allow you to make notation of who the property owner is and who the business, if it's a different person, which it is in most cases, who the business operator, proprietor, whatever you want to call it, is in that? I mean, I know the property owner is actually probably
Yeah, it's all.
smaller number than.
It is pulling like, any of you getting on, the city getting on the GIS system, it's pulling up the public data. But yes, there's absolutely fields for making notations about, okay, here is the person who owns, who actually I talked to and these are the notes about it. So it's things like that. But again, it's just a data tool. And it will only be as good and as useful to any of us as the time we put into filling it up with good data to begin with, and then staying on top of the changes, because man, this town is dynamic right now. And I think we all see that as well.
Do you think the issue of vacant storefronts has that got kind of ebbed right now? Because we seem to. We've had some, I mean, in our joint commission, we discussed.
To be honest, I'm not really sure what's going on. I'm a little this is just my personal, this is not based on data. This is my personal gut level response right now. I'm a little concerned that there are properties that I thought would be, there are properties that I know are being actively marketed to try and find a new tenant. That I am surprised do not have a tenant. And the time period is getting longer. Some of it is, I also know part of what's attractive, right?
Excuse me.
Finding a small property that's affordable, that has a hood, and that somebody can turn into a food service business. Oh, that is a unicorn in this town right now. Something that's already set up that isn't going to turn into a huge can of worms with the building permitting process. That would be hard. But there are some other spaces that are more kind of professional office space or retail ready that, I'm surprised are still sitting there.
Well, I've talked to a couple business owners just like 6 weeks ago now, and they were saying that it's anecdotal, that, that things come up and they get snapped up really quickly right now.
I would say that was absolutely true, say a year or so ago. But again, my concern is that there are some that are just sitting there. Now, again, we haven't necessarily gone through. And maybe that's a good thing, actually, because sometimes being snapped up quickly might mean that the property owner isn't necessarily vetting for their best fit for the space. And that, I think, is the other thing, one of the other hidden things about a vibrant downtown, right? Is let's also make sure that our property owners are understanding that they are allowed to be choosy. They don't have to take the first person with a business plan, first person with a check that walks through the door. They're allowed to ask about business plans. They're allowed to think about, what do I want to have my property contribute to in terms of our downtown? Now, I think that might be an incredibly productive space for planning commission. I mean, you can't legislate it, but it might be a really interesting model in the back of your head. I think that was one thing that Astoria and some other main streets have done where they've said, actually, we do want to reward folks who are doing retail businesses and they're gonna be open more than 5 days a week. Those will be the people that we slash the occupancy fees, or we're going to, you know,
Prioritize them and push them through.
we're gonna
faster.
prioritize them and make sure that they get through. And maybe professional office buildings in our historic downtown core, you know, maybe we don't need. Let's pick on the lawyers. Maybe we don't need more lawyers.
I think the bigger problem than vacant storefronts is underutilized.
Yeah.
And we need to hold everybody to the same standard, whether
Well,
it's
is
a city or whatever it is, but I
I read
think
an article about, these, some communities make at least 50% of the storefront has to be commercial. And so that kind of, gears towards that issue.
I also think that parking drives this train a bit. Like, for instance, Gracie's Annex,
Yes.
we're gonna end up now with 2 storefronts, but on the Strand, but we're gonna end up with an empty parking lot on Main Street.
I was gonna suggest another
So-
proactive item, and that'd be a parking plan,
So,
because I think it has actually been detrimental to the development. Ongoing.
Well, let's also just throw in here a little factoid, which has some great data behind it. Which is that actually, if you have parking in your downtown that causes people to have to walk at least a half a block, maybe even 2 blocks, you are automatically gonna have a more vibrant downtown.
Yep. No,
But if you have a main street and you can just pull right in front of the storefront you wanna go to and then hop in and then hop out, the more walking that
yes.
your citizens do. I mean, it's not a popular opinion, but
It's popular in some.
I mean, talking about a parking plan, and I'm looking at trying to get people out of the cars and walking.
My
That's part of
feeling
it.
vis-a-vis all this is problem is too much parking.
Yeah. The
that's
parking, like,
friendly.
yeah.
what is lack of funding? I'm assuming that you've been hit by lack of funding. Your ability to help us, anything? Would you like to speak to that at all?
Well, you know, we operate pretty lean. And I think that'll be an ongoing conversation that we need to start up with council about, you know, how we know that we need to diversify our funding, and I think we've made a good case over the last couple of years about what we're able to contribute to the city, not just to council, but you know, this is also making a case to our fellow business owners and our fellow citizens that we're doing good work. We would like your support. We're figuring it out and iterating every year about how do we nudge things forward in a way that makes sense. You know, man, I would love to have a fund, a $50,000 fund that we could write $1,000 grants out of for things like, you know, okay, this business needs a new awning. This business needs a new ADA, you know, accessible door, or needs a new ADA toilet or whatever else. This one needs matching funds in order to get a hood installed or inspected. But again, that's pie in the sky land. And some of it is we do have to just roll up our sleeves and figure out how to get work done together.
You get involved if a business comes to the Small Business Administration or whatever and wants to find us something.
Yeah, I mean,
Main Street to.
We do it unofficially already. We also point people at, I think through our networks, we get a fair amount of like, hey, who's the business owner there? I think we can take credit for a fair number of the placements, the more recent placements of matchmaking property owners with new businesses. And
Good way for writing policy that they get involved with, or
Yeah, all businesses. It's
This might be pie in the future, but it would be really great if there was some sort of webpage or online form that someone could fill out, say, this is what I'm looking for, and then business owners or.
Yeah, it's
This-
tricky. It's totally tricky, right? Those are hard to maintain and,
having spent a little time doing that matchmaking, there's so many things that you think you're looking for a storefront, you think you want this much square footage, but you haven't thought through the fact that, oh, actually, just because it's been vacant for 20 years doesn't mean that I can put a coffee shop in there. Right? It turns out the zoning is wrong and the everything else. So yeah, I think, it's the same thing about having realtors involved with the Main Street, effort, because we do a lot of, educating all the way around, and this town shares a lot of information. There's a lot of people that want things to win, and I can look at your list of your sign permits and your temporary use permits and your site development plans, and I can see that those are folks, a fair amount of those are people that I've had conversations with one way or another. Or that I know a board member has, or that I know that the person that I call with questions has. So yeah, we're all part of the same team, whether it's Columbia Economic Team or the Small Business Development Resource Center, or or you guys going, hey, I think you should call those crazy people at Main Street and see if they know someplace that's got it. We kind of had one of those conversations while we were waiting to walk down here. So
I'll say personally, when I retired and leased my building, I had 3 different people aggressively approaching us. So if there's that kind of, and ready to go building, but to have that.
well,
kind
it
of
helps to have a
interest.
gorgeous, permitted, renovated, building in a prime spot, and so. We talked a little bit about Astoria. Astoria talks about filling in the gaps. That has been their strategy over the years, is one by one, lot by lot, filling in. I think of it as like, an orthodontia kind of process, right? We're just one by one, we're going to fill in the gaps, and we're going to beautify, and we're going to make them better. That will lift up everything. It would be really easy to target. We all know which ones are on our top 5 list, right? I guess part of what I would suggest is that there are a lot of different ways to approach making change. And it doesn't always have to be about the stick or about shame. But sometimes it might need to be. Unfortunately, you guys are sitting in a seat where maybe those are the tools you sometimes have to use.
just the threat of using them. Yeah, it's just so that they know that there is code.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they have to abide by.
Yeah, I think knowing that there's a consistent standard that will actually be enforced.
Here.
Having that as your context helps you have this larger conversation with individual property owners or tenants or whatever about what do you need? What are you looking for? And what is the gap between that and space not being used in a productive way? And in some cases, as you alluded to earlier, maybe that gap is unclosable, but it'd be really nice if we could identify the low-hanging fruit where it's easy to close.
I would like to remind us all of one thing, which is that you're all volunteers, we're all volunteers, but the city has paid staff that are now going to be the next year is going to be a real crunch, and they're going to be incredibly overworked. He will be incredibly overworked. And I think that we we need to think about that as how do we also be smart and intelligent about that as a resource that has a limit. And so that would be the other thing. We can imagine a million different things that we could do, right? If we only had another $50,000 and Main Street could run around and do a grant program, whatever. But when it comes down to it, you do have staff. We have staff as a part of the city, and we need to be mindful about what's realistic and what are highest priorities. And you as a body get to decide what you're going to direct him to in terms of your needs, what you're going to direct him to spend his time and his energy on. I'm wondering if perhaps we already have the tools we need, and it's more about deciding, you know, how much time, how much enforcement needs to be put into place and whether now is the time to do that or not. I don't know.
We can't direct them. We have to ask the councils to staff.
Correction taken, but yeah. But I also know there's some council sitting in the back corner listening, so.
They look to me.
Okay, so just so we're clear, on this proactive item, we've directed Commissioner Jacobson to be the chair of this, just to remind everybody, or who wasn't maybe here when we started this thing, that he's going to be the chair. I'm doing this.
Chair of one.
Chair of one, yeah. So.
Yeah, have anyone else there with you?
I still get in arguments though.
You have anything in closing that you'd like to?
Well, I guess some of it would be, what would you like? It sounds like data.
This is what we had.
Data is it. Okay.
Joint meeting
Okay.
was this getting the data.
Yeah. Okay, then let's go gather data. Let's have a good report, and I've got a tool we can use, and it's absolutely shareable. It's 100%, you know, it's 100%. In fact, I could probably give you a login of your very own, but we'll figure that out. It's absolutely part of our mission to share this kind of data with the city. So there's no firewall around it.
I just want to make sure. that
Yeah.
we can deal with it.
And then I would say the building official might be a good place to, we started conversations. Mike DeRoyo was going to go to Astoria and talk to their building official and see how we might have any kind of workarounds that just addressing health and safety, so that that involves the carrot of what maybe we can incentivize people to do if we can work with anything on that.
Yeah, I think that's gonna be another step.
And then you can figure out, if you wanna each individually talk to business owners and establish that relationship and see how we can be a partner and be a help.
That's what we discussed during the.
I like.
Yeah, my biggest question is, how do you incentivize people to be open? We have these great businesses down there and they're closed all the time.
By getting a bunch of customers down.
But it's
They see that, hey, money making.
So acknowledging that the data project, the data is not all there yet. And that these individual conversations with various tenants, property owners haven't necessarily happened. I am curious whether, just sort of anecdotally, whether Main Street has a sense from people about what the causes of underutilization are, if from their perspective.
I think Aaron kind of went through that a little bit. Each one of them, their own story, each building has its own story because each owner has their own story.
I kind of figured that wasn't
So
going to
it's
be a
not the
convenient
same
answer.
the way through.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, yeah.
Just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
And, you know, I would echo the handful of blight storefronts that have existed for quite a while that everybody knows about. You know, we can have all the data in the world, but we still know that
Yeah.
those are the problem children.
Well, it seems to me like that's almost a third type of issue. Like we've got vacant, we've got underutilized, and then we have just falling apart. And I think it's appropriate and legitimate for us when it comes to making recommendations to the council about how to consistently enforce. I think it's appropriate to distinguish between here's a facility that's underutilized, here's a facility that's vacant, but is being taken care of, and here's a facility that's just being allowed to fall to pieces. One of those might deserve a more stringent enforcement look.
You have data on how long properties have been vacant? Is that part of your data at all?
I don't have current data that I would, we do track through some of our monthly meetings about, as things turn over. But that hasn't been formally kind of
Those are
logged in.
activated.
Yeah. So, but yeah. I guess maybe I'm, the glass is always a little more than half full. I think there's a lot of signs for optimism. I think having this conversation where we're acknowledging that there's some nuance here is important. And that behind all of it, there somewhere out there is a real person. And I guess I'm eternally optimistic that there are ways to connect with real people and solve problems. And some of it, I think I'm hoping that that's where we can start. But yes, indeed, there may come a point where it's just obvious that that's not the right tool. So.
Anybody else have anything to add?
Our building official did reach out to Astoria. Astoria has recently faced some turnover in their building division. And so the building official he talked to didn't have too much intelligence for them. But the latest building official in their turnover is someone who worked for us, Bob Johnston, back in the Let's Be Business Friendly days.
That's good.
I'd love to suggest there's a historian connected with their city hall. I'll find the name and send it to you. He's worked with the Main Street network just in the last couple of months. I think he officially serves part-time as an official city historian, but he has a wealth of knowledge for how they have sometimes creatively tackled a building by building strategy. And it was one of those that I was like, oh, I really wish I could have Jacob or Jenny with us for these. And I think that's part of the Astoria approach is that, it wasn't always just a building official. It wasn't always just a planning department. Sometimes it was the lean in heavy to their Main Street and how do we solve this creatively? So he might be a fun resource because he's been there for years.
Do you have a name somewhere?
He's somewhere. I don't know. I'm not gonna even try and pull it out of it.
Be mindful using other cities' resources too. It's their time too.
Historians are lovely because they like to share what they know. So.
We have a great one on the city council, right in Sundance, so.
Yeah, indeed.
All right.
Thank you
so
guys.
much.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, city council liaison report, you have anything?
Well, I think we're making headway, on the police station. It's positive, and we did have a developer talk in front of us, council, last session. That was positive there, we'll see what they come forward with. And, but it's, they made one comment, which was interesting, I haven't heard from anybody, but they were impressed because they usually get contacted by cities that just have a raw piece of dirt and say, well, we'd like to develop it and that sort of thing. And here at St. Helens, they came in and they looked at what we've already done and they were impressed that we've already pulled the trigger on this thing. And sounds like they might want to jump aboard, so.
I know we have a lot of criticism on financial decisions of the city and things, but attending the ribbon cutting of the waterfront, I was impressed when, I don't remember the gentleman's title, but saying that city of St. Helens has gotten way farther than most cities get. So that really struck a chord with me. So proud of us. Right. Any for your information items, Jacob?
Say goodbye to Jenny. This is it. Last meeting.
Bye. It was nice working with you when we did. And all along.
Well, we really appreciate everything. I think you're amazing. I'm really concerned about. Well, since we're not replacing you, but really concerned about effective grant writing and things that you do such an amazing job on. So.
I do hope you find a
Happy
way
venture.
back.
I would,
But, you know, you might be a horror thing, but
I had one question I'll ask here. Was the CLG grant your first grant experience here? Or was it something that had to do with parks?
Sparks.
Okay.
Yeah, the first grant I ever wrote was the McCormick Park Bridge. 2015. You used to have to leave the park to get on the other half of the park.
oh, wow.
You had to walk into on road, use those bridges to get to the disc golf course on the other side.
Do you happen to know the cumulative amount that you got grants for the city?
Yeah, it's over 10 million.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Great job. That's impressive. Very impressive.
you'll be missed.
Very much so.
Thanks, guys.
But we're also so excited for you. So be a great adventure.
Yeah.
Anything else, Jacob?
Did I?
Does anybody else have anything?
Just, again, I'd like to add that parking plan as a proactive item. Like it's something that we've discussed for an extended period. We could put a little fire under that.
How would you propose that moving forward?
Well,
Besides just another thing to add to the list.
just another, right now, it's just another thing to add to our list. You know, I haven't delved into it myself. So, but it is something that needs to be addressed.
And this is extremely minor, but perhaps a way to make a tiny bit of forward momentum on that would be just framing it not just as a parking plan, but a
Livability plan.
I'm trying to think of the right phrase because transit summons up a whole other set of context, but it could be a plan that encompasses both the parking and also the walking of the area.
We do have that.
Yes. But I think that when we as a group are talking about this, we're not just talking about how many parking spaces should there be in X district. I think it's a larger question of how do we facilitate people getting around that space in a useful way.
Well, how do we devise a parking plan that doesn't impact the vibrancy of the city?
Yeah.
Same grant program that offers grants for transportation systems plans has a program for parking management studies. So it'll be free for the city to participate in this effort, but you have to deal with their cycle, right? Like it's not just open year round, you apply for it, it's a whole process, you compete. But I just don't see a way a volunteer committee is gonna come up with a parking management study that's usable and long lasting.
Is there anybody to do that work when you're gone?
No.
So
Not
right
that I-
now, it is a project listed in the proposed transportation systems plan, which we have a grant to do. I think it's gonna be close to $300,000 grant, but that's a citywide transportation systems plan. Transportation systems plans include projects, and one of the ones that we want to have listed in there with at least some advancement on the effort is that.
So there's work underway.
But it's a patience factor. And that's, I see the issue in the next several months. It's just the patience factor.
Do you want to make a proposal that we add it as a proactive item, or you have some thoughts?
Should we come back, look at it and come back and then discuss? Would anybody take a?
I mean, I think we need to make some I mean, the problem is we've only got so much that we can do.
Yeah.
You know, at some point, what we do is recommendations to city council, and they're constrained by budgets and whatever else there might be. I mean, I don't think it's lost news to the city council that parking is an issue that we face. You know, we brought it up when going back to the when Steve was here, and the people came forth suggesting a beautiful building with a great concept of what it was going to be for both commercial and some residential. You know, we had to knock it down because of
Right.
the parking.
Yeah.
And there were some
Fantastic.
ideas that there was some property that was available to possibly do some stuff with parking. But the city, you know, for whatever reasons, didn't part with it at that time. And so, I mean, it's a huge problem for us.
Yeah, it is.
I agree it needs to be addressed. I'm just, don't want us to be spinning, you know, our wheels to
And
no
everybody
avail.
thinking, yeah, and everybody thinking, well, they got it covered too. It's, you know, we're just doing, you know, a bit on it, you know, advising. You know, what we can. I mean, we don't have to, you know, get the final end product for, you know, with designs for the council to look at, but I mean, some input
Yeah.
and, you know, prodding would help.
I just make a suggestion. There's an organization called Strong Towns. And I think it's strongtowns.org. And a lot of their focus is on small town parking issues. And so if you have time, take a look.
Strong.
Podcast.
Yeah, so anyway, all right. With that, I'm gonna adjourn.